First of all, Dr. Allinson, why do we need this change?
Because we need to keep our laws up to date. That's not just an academic argument. What this bill is doing is protecting victims of crime. It's actually saying what is crime. The last bill was back in 1992, before the internet, before people had mobile phones. We now know that image-based sexual abuse is a real problem for women. We now know that sexual abuse can affect men as well. And we need to respond to that by having laws in place to actually bring the perpetrators of crime to justice, but also to protect victims and give victims that voice that they need. One of the things we've been doing in the Department of Home Affairs is trying to make sure that our legislation is up to date and responds to the needs of people on this island. And so that's why it's really important that we have a consultation on this so we get it right. And so there's another 2 weeks to go on the online consultation. But if people want to feed in by emailing us or contacting the department who don't like doing things online or want to write in, that's absolutely fine as well.
How much knowledge do you have to have of this subject area in order to be able to take part in the consultation?
You don't have to have that much academic knowledge. Some of the questions are quite basic in terms of what is consent, what people feel about consent. Should it be explicit or implied? What people feel is right and what resonates for them, perhaps due to their own experiences. And I have to say, if anyone who's listening to this during the discussion does get concerned about their own experiences and abuse, I apologise for that. But it's important we get some of these things out in the open so that we can actually help people who are victims of crime address that, but also so that we can have the best law possible to support them if they feel able to actually report that crime, to actually then feed in through the police, feed in through the court, and actually support them through that period.
There may be some people who might say that, sort of taking part in these consultations doesn't really make a difference. But Tanya, what would you say to that?
I would say it absolutely does make a difference. My experience of having been, I was only elected in March, and I think that prior to that, I probably had a preconceived idea as to how much input you could actually have into a public consultation and whether or not that would actually be used and worked with and people are actually going to go through it or if it would be ignored. I had my own concerns, but having actually kind of come into the Department for Home Affairs, I'm very, very, very aware that every single response is taken into account. Every single response is taken into account. And you can have a real influence on this legislation by putting those ideas forward. Because if you don't say anything, then it's likely nobody's going to hear you. And if nobody hears you, then there might be a repercussion or a consequence to that down the line.
And what for you then would you say are some of the most important or crucial elements in this bill and perhaps some of the changes as well?
Definitely in terms of consent. I think previously we've not really had a full idea of exactly some of these age ranges have kind of just spanned a little bit too. There have been too many of them. So this is like a tidy up exercise to an extent as well. Certainly in terms of consent, certainly in terms of actually incorporating, the other side of this. Very, very often people think of sex offences, they think of, it's, actions against women. It isn't about women. This is about equality. This is about both. And this is about kind of ensuring that, all of those ideas that we've had previously, this consultation itself is all of those ideas we've had previously about updating those, modernising those and bringing, a piece of legislation in line with the morality of the times in what we have, our ideological standpoint for this particular moment in time and where we're at, because technological advances have happened. We've had an awful lot of advancement in terms of society and where society's moving, and this is about sort of realigning with that.
Dr. Allinson, interesting, Tanya, talking there about the technological advances, and it's something that you hinted at in your first answer as well. I mean, the nature of crimes in this area are evolving all the time. Where do you look for best practice to put a bill like this together?
That's a very good question, because I think people on the Isle of Man have automatically assumed we just cut and paste what's happening in the UK. Obviously, England have got very different laws than Scotland, who are often far more innovative. Parts of this bill have looked for what they do in New Zealand, for instance, and right across the world, just to try to find the best ways of tackling some of these problems. We've been in contact with law professors in the UK who are actually briefing Parliament in Westminster now about things like upskirting. I hate that term, and revenge porn and these sort of things that are in the tabloid press and laughed about. If you're a victim of those crimes, if you get a picture of you that is private, put on social media and used to humiliate you, whether you are a man or a woman, that is a crime. You are a victim of that, and it can really shake your confidence. So what we've tried to do with this bill, we've been working on it for about the last year, is look at best practice, but also as things have evolved in the UK, particularly in terms of image-based sexual abuse, look at the best way of dealing with that and the best way of both educating people that it is wrong, but also protecting people who are violated by it.
I wonder, in that instance, when we're talking about images that perhaps somebody might send of themselves, to what extent does an individual have to take responsibility for distributing pictures of themselves?
Well, I think if you take an intimate image of yourself and you share it with a partner, that's a two-way relationship. What we're talking about here is using it to humiliate or violate that person, putting it online, leaking it to the press, then publicising it. And in some ways, people can feel as violated with that as if it was a physical act. They feel afraid of going out. They feel afraid of contacting their friends. They withdraw from society because of that violation. So I think, although it seems to be a more of a modern problem, I think it shows that the way that people who abuse people, particularly women, can use new technologies. And we also know about that in terms of child abuse and the rise of internet pornography. So what this bill tries to do is look at abuse as a whole, and also deals with obscene publications as well. So it's a bit of a monster, but the consultation itself narrows it down to a couple of core themes that we're really looking for people's views on and their advice about how we get this right.
And rather worryingly, several of those things that you just mentioned apply now to our young people, especially that nature of sort of taking photos and sending them to each other. And I know that it is a particular problem even over here on our wonderful island. Is this bill something that would be appropriate for young people also to take part in?
Absolutely. One of the things we talk about during the bill is the age of consent, the ages to do with people being abused. It talks about people in positions of trust, because one of the things that this bill is trying to respond to is valid concerns that have come out of the court, whereby in the past various people, particularly sports coaches, for instance, haven't been able to be brought to justice for abusing their position of trust. So it's asking about things like that, and I think that would resonate with some young people who have equal concerns about the way that they're treated and the way that they treat each other.
Going through the consultation, something I found interesting was the issue of anonymity if somebody is accused of something. And again, this is something we've talked about a lot on this programme, at what point somebody's name should be released into the open. Because again, this is something that can have far-reaching repercussions. Yeah,
and it's a fine balancing act. I mean, one of the reasons that was brought in was a case on the Isle of Man, whereby the name of a victim of sexual abuse was leaked onto social media. And the judge in that case knew it was wrong. Everyone knew it was wrong, but all they had to, the only way they could get justice was by fining the person. There was no custodial sentence, and so one of the questions is about that. Should the courts have a custodial sentence they can put on people who flagrantly publicise the name of a victim?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that 100%. I think, it's a very, very large piece of legislation, and I know that there are an awful lot of topics that are encompassed within it. But, I mean, at the end of the day, some of these things are happening within our schools. The police are more than happy to kind of, tell the absolute extent of it. I know that I've even as a journalist working in Manx Radio's newsroom, talking to the Chief Constable back in 2017 about his annual report, and he was talking about the image-based sexual abuse that was happening within our schools. So you've got under 16s that are sending messages to one another. I'm not saying that all of them are. they're not. But there are cases where under 16s are sending messages to each other, and what they're not realising is that they're putting themselves in a really, really difficult position. These images are of youngsters. They may be the same age, but they are of youngsters, and therefore, where do we draw the line with that? At the end of the day, it is an underage child, a picture of an underage child being shared and distributed. So if they're not thinking about things like that, this gives them an opportunity to do so and get online. And yes, they should be contributing. At the end of the day, it's their society as well as it is everybody else's.
I mean, although we're talking about a bit of legislation here, I think you highlight a wider piece of work about education and educating people in terms of some of the hidden harms that are implicit in new technologies and the internet. The fact that you send a picture to somebody who you think you know might be somebody completely different, and because it's an internet-based picture, they can then share that on with whoever they want to share it onto. The previous bill in 1992 dealt very much with photographs. We're now dealing with data. We're not even dealing with videos. We're dealing with streaming. And so what we're trying to do with this bit of legislation is have a decent law that fits the time, that can be updated. But also there's a much bigger body of work in terms of education, the way we deal and educate people to actually manage their own data and manage their own safety.
And it's a very important subject to cover, but the bill itself is extremely far-reaching. Just give us an idea, Tanya, of some of the sort of headline topics that it covers in this bill.
Well, I've got the bill itself in front of me at the moment, so just to go through like a couple of the contents pages here. I mean, you've got rape in here, which of course we're then looking at not just the rape of females, which is what has been concentrated on before, but we're also looking at male rape, assault, child sex offences, so sexual activity with the child, engaging in sexual activity in the presence of a child. There are an awful lot of issues, very, very serious issues, sexual exploitation of children, prostitution. There's an awful lot in here that I think that, if you don't resonate with something within this bill, or you don't, know of somebody that may have had a difficult experience, then I'd be quite shocked. So it's, there's an awful lot in there, including like the idea of a pardon for homosexual offences as well.
We've had a comment in about why the accused but not the accuser is named, and that is also something, Dr. Allinson, that's covered in this consultation.
It is, and it is a fine balancing act. There will be some cases where the accused may want anonymity, and we've seen cases in the UK where the press have been very, very eager to publicise that, and before they've even been charged or taken to court. On the other hand, the police would say that sometimes by naming the accused, other victims will come out and help with the case. So one of the parts of the consultation is to look at both, to look at the victim and the person who's actually been accused, to make sure we get that balance right. And it's not automatic that everyone gets named, but you should have that ability to either keep it private or to publicise that, depending on the individual case.
So if someone's thinking they would like to take part in this consultation, first of all, do they need, it's quite a hefty document, do they need to have read the bill in order to do the consultation?
Not at all. I mean, if they want to, it's all online. So it's the consult.gov.im website, and it's at the top of that. It's a 200-page bill. It's a bit of a monster, and so people want to read through that, please do. Parts of it are really quite graphic, though, because it deals with graphic crimes. But what we've tried to do is, during the consultation, bring out key themes like consent, like abuse of positions of trust, sentencing levels, what people think should be the right sentence for that crime, obscene images. And people can, if they want to, pick and mix. They don't have to fill out the entire thing. If they have a particular topic that's important for them, they can just fill out that bit. And obviously, if people don't like going online and would rather do that by sending a letter or sending a private email, be more than happy to take that on board and feed that into the overall consultation process.
This consultation is open until February the 4th. We have posted the link on our social media, but sorry, Tanya.
Sorry, Beth. Just as a sort of in addition to that, I mean, even once the consultation closes, obviously we really want people to respond, but once the consultation closes, there will always be an opportunity. If somebody down the line feels like they really do want to contribute to it, there will always be an opportunity for them to get in touch with their MHK and have that level of input as this bill then progresses down the line through the branches.